In today's video, I'll be taking this massive pile of assorted parts here and turning them into a brand new camera rig. So yeah, this will be the new camera rig I'll be using to film these videos going forward. In fact, I actually already built this camera rig a couple of weeks ago and I've used it for my last two videos. So the two videos about ruckus access points I filmed on this new rig, but I wanted to make a couple of changes anyway, so I've disassembled it completely to make this video. Now obviously I'm not an expert in this sort of stuff, I'm just more of a YouTuber who happens to need a camera and wanted to build this. There's much better YouTubers out there that have much more detailed, in-depth videos about camera rigs, but I thought this could be quite interesting to try out, and quite interesting to make a video on because it's not something my general audience probably sees that often, so I thought it could be quite useful to show off and kind of show how these things work. So yeah, we've got an absolute massive pile of parts here, and by the end of this video, we'll have a fully complete camera setup. So first of all, what is a camera rig? Well, essentially, the idea is if you're wanting to film with either a mirrorless camera, a DSLR, or some sort of cinema box camera type camera, you're probably going to want to have additional hardware attached to it. For example, if we look at a camera like this one here we're using, it's not that ideal for video. It's designed for taking still photography. So if you want to use it for video, you've not really got the handling, there's not that many places to grip on it to hold it really steady, you've got a fairly small screen, the built-in audio recording is not that good, things like that. So the idea of building a camera rig is attaching additional hardware around your camera to give you things like better audio recording, better viewfinders with a better screen, potentially better video recording through an external recorder, which is what we'll be doing here, better audio hardware, bigger batteries, better grips, all that kind of stuff. And that's what all these parts are. So we'll take all these parts, build a camera rig, and turn this camera into an absolute video shooting powerhouse. So how this video is going to work is I'm going to clear all these parts out of the way, and then I'll start building the camera rig up on camera. And while I'm doing that, I'll talk about each part I'm putting in, why I'm putting it in, what it does, and kind of how it works. So throughout the video, the camera rig will sort of go together, and hopefully you'll learn about how these things go together. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll get all this stuff cleared out of the way, and let's start building it. So I suppose the first place to start off with the camera rig is the camera. And here it is. And what I've gone for is a Panasonic Lumix S5. And this is one of Panasonic's more entry-level full-frame cameras, but being a full-frame camera, it's still pretty high up in the range. And it's a really solid camera. Now, the reason I went for this camera in particular is that I'll be using a Blackmagic Video Assist external recorder. I made a video about that previously. And that supports recording Blackmagic RAW from certain cameras, so I can record RAW video which has much more detail in it, so it's so much better for things like colour correcting, colour grading, and adjusting the footage. However, using that, there's only a small list of cameras that are compatible with outputting Blackmagic RAW, and the Panasonic Lumix S5 is one of them. There's a bunch of others from Panasonic, some other Nikons, Fujifilm I think have some. There's a few brands, Sigma, I think there's quite a few brands that do support it, but the Lumix S5 was one of them. And then having an absolutely massive full frame sensor will be really good for low light. It'll also allow me to do things like get a really good shallow depth of field, but as you can see there, the sensor is absolutely huge. In fact, just for a bit of fun, here we have the sensor on my new Lumix S5, and here's the APS-C sensor on my old Sony a6000. You can see the new sensor is so much bigger. So that'll be really good for low light and things like shallow depth of field and stuff like that. Now I'm not a camera expert, so I'm probably saying a lot of wrong things in this, but that's my understanding anyway. But yeah, it's a really nice full frame camera that supports 5.9K Blackmagic RAW video, which will be absolutely excellent. So yeah, this can actually shoot in 5.9K, not just 4K. Seems a bit silly, but it gives me the scope to do things like crop into the video and stuff without losing too much quality, so that'll be really good. Now this isn't the latest and greatest Panasonic camera. They've already released a couple of revisions to the S5, the S5 II, I think the S5 III is now out. They do have some improvements such as better autofocus, and I possibly should have gone for those, but I got a really good deal on this second hand, so it made sense to get this just because it was such a good price. And the great thing with a camera rig is you can easily replace all the parts. It's a bit like building a PC. I can use this camera for now. A few years down the line I can say, right, no, I want a better camera, take out the S5, buy another camera, slot it into the rig, and keep the rest of the hardware the same. I don't need to replace the entire rig every time I want to get a new camera. So that's the camera. Now let's start building it. So here we have the camera, and now the first part of any camera rig is what's called the cage. And that's this thing here. If you look at the camera itself, it doesn't really have much hardware for mounting things on it. All you've got is a screw thread on the bottom and a cold shoe on the top. So yeah, you can probably stick it on a tripod and maybe stick a monitor on the top, but that's really all you've got. There's not that much mounting hardware on it. So that's where you use a camera cage. So you buy cages for different models of cameras. They are kind of tied to the model, so this is a cage specifically for the S5. Also bear in mind that the S5 2 and 3 are slightly smaller or slightly bigger. They're a different size to this anyway, so they use different cages. So this is for the original S5. And all you'll do is you'll take the camera, slot it into the cage, like so. Put a screw in the bottom, and what this now gives you is an absolute ton of additional mounting points all around the camera to mount additional hardware on. So we'll get that screw in, and then we'll talk about that. And there we go, the camera's now in its cage. So all you need to do is put the screw in the bottom there, that's now secure, and that's now completely solid, and I can now mount hardware around the camera. Now, quickly on the topic of screws, just a quick disclaimer. Obviously I've already built this camera rig and then taken it apart again. When you buy various parts of camera rig equipment, plates, cages, handles, all that sort of stuff, they all come with a couple of screws and a couple of Allen keys to put it together. In building this camera rig, I've jumbled up all these parts between the different parts I bought. So if you, for example, see me using a particular screw or particular fixing to attach a particular piece of hardware to the camera, that doesn't necessarily come with that particular part. So if you're buying these bits of equipment, which I'll link all in the description, just make sure you check the exact product you're buying and work out what it comes with in terms of screws, because I've kind of jumbled them around here. And you'll probably find you need to do that, because the thing you bought will maybe not come with two of the same size of screw, and you need two of that certain size, so you need to nick a screw off something else. You kind of end up moving them around. And it's the sort of thing that you'd really struggle if you were just to place a single order, buy all the camera rig equipment, and then try and build it. You'll probably find you'll need to go back and order a couple of little extra screws or little things to adjust it, because you didn't get it quite right. But yeah, so the screws on this are all a bit jumbled up, but hopefully you'll get the rough idea. But yep, that's now the cage on the camera. And if you're familiar with camera rigs, this cage might look a little bit different. You know, I've not gone for your traditional small rig cage that everyone would go for. And it's one of these fall cam cages, which ironically is a funny name for something that's meant to hold a camera really securely, is calling it fall cam, but you know, I'm sure it's pretty secure. But this is an interesting product. And I'll link this all in the description. It's not a sponsor, but it's a really interesting product. The way these fall cam cages work is they use their F22 quick release system. So with most camera rigs, you have different ways to attach various accessories onto the camera. The most traditional way would just be using screws. So if you say you want a monitor mount or a top handle, you'd put it on, put a screw through and screw it on. Same with the side handle, you'd screw it all on. However, that's a bit of a pain, because if you want to take things off in the field, you don't want to be trying to find Allen keys and take things apart. So that's where quick releases come in. One very common option for this is what's called a NATO rail, which is where you get a metal rail that would sit on top of the camera, and you'd screw that onto the camera and screw it onto your cage, and you can get handles and top and monitor mounts and stuff that are compatible with a NATO rail, and that would then clip on and allow you to clip it on and clip it off without needing to use a screw. And the NATO rail is kind of standardised, so lots of different brands sell NATO rail compatible products. However, a NATO rail itself is relatively long, so there's certain situations where you can't necessarily fit it in, or it's not the easiest thing to fit. And that's where this F22 system comes in, and you can see it printed all over the camera here. This is kind of proprietary to the Fallcam product, but it is so cool, and having used it, I'm so glad I've gone for it. I would really recommend it. So for example, here we have a top handle, and this is another F22 top handle. So you can see on the camera, we have these plates here, which are F22 compatible, same with on the side here, there's various points, they're all labelled. And then the handle itself has this F22 bracket on it here that's like the other half of it. So if I want to put the top handle on, all I do is just slide it onto the top of the camera and it clicks in. And there are three different positions on top of this cage, so I can move it to the middle, for example, there, and move it over to the side there, which is more actually centred with the camera being off to the side on the top of the camera. And if I pick that up, that's now attached. And then to release it, there's a button on the front that you simply press down and it slides off. So what's really good with this system is it's also auto-locking. Things like NATO rails aren't, so you have to kind of slide it on and then make sure you tighten it up and lock it in place. And if you don't do that, you could have something on that looks quite secure, pick the camera up, tip it at a funny angle, and your monitor falls off. Whereas with this, it's all auto-locking, so it's really, really secure. That's on there, that's now not coming off. Then you've got other accessories, like say the side handle here, which also helps you hold the camera. That just slots on like that, and that's now securely in place. And it is just so cool having this completely quick release system. I've got a bunch of other equipment from this range. We're not purely using this, there's a lot of other options from other brands here we'll be using as well. But using this Fullcam F22 system for the key parts that I want to be able to reconfigure is super useful. I can easily put a different handle on that side. I could do silly things if I wanted. You know, if I want my top handle over here, I can do that and do that for whatever reason. If for some reason I decide I really hate ergonomics, I can put my top handle on the side there for some reason. It's really versatile, so it's pretty cool. This system is absolutely excellent, and I've got a lot of more hardware from this range we'll be taking a look at later. But yep, that's the cage on the camera, and as you can see, here's a couple of handles we've been sort of briefly demonstrating. We've got a side handle here, which goes on the side, so when you're holding the camera, obviously it's got a built-in grip there that's quite easy to hold, so just having an additional handle on the side there makes handheld camera work so much easier. And likewise, a top handle is also just really useful, either if you want to do some sort of particularly low down shots and you want to hold the camera like that, and sort of hold it like that, or just when you've got the whole rig, it's really easy just to pick it up and put it down, having a handle. So a top handle is really good to have as well. So that's two parts we have there. So mounting a few little bits of hardware onto the camera cage is all well and good, but you will hit a limit there. And I've got much more hardware I want to attach to this rig than could reasonably fit onto the cage itself. So that's where this comes in, which is a base plate and some rods. So the way this works, and you'll see this in a lot of camera rigs, is you have this thing called a base plate. What you do is you mount your tripod plate onto this, mount the camera on top, and then you have these rods. So the camera will be sitting on here, and then you have these rods, which are 15mm rods. These then slide through this plate and are then locked in with these fixings on the side. And what these rods do is they will protrude from the front and back of the camera. What you can then get is things like these rod clamps here that mount over the rods, so you'd have another rod here obviously, and you can start fitting additional hardware that will hang off the front and the back of the camera. This allows you to fit things like battery plates. I'll be fitting microphone equipment. You can fit lens support, so if you've got a really big lens, what you can do is you can have the rod protrude from the front of the camera and have a bracket here that supports the lens to make it a bit more secure if you're holding it around. You can fit a lot of additional stuff onto these. You can even get things like these little single rod clamps. If you just want to mount a little bit harder off to the side, you can slide that over and that'll just mount onto one of the rods, and you can mount additional hardware onto that through these mounting points. So these are going to be really useful. So we'll get the rods out of the way for now, although actually I'll quickly show the rods I've bought. These are from Small Rig, and these are 30cm rods, but they're actually really cool because it comes as a kit, and these are extendable. So the kit also comes with these 20cm rods, which I tested out, but they weren't quite long enough for what I'm doing here. So I'm going to use the 30cm rods. However, these are actually threaded on the inside, as you can maybe make out there, and the kit comes with a couple of couplers. So what you do is, if you want to extend the rods, all you need to do is screw the coupler into one of the rods, take your other rod, screw it on, and now you have a 50cm rod. Now obviously I'm not going to be using this normally, but this could be particularly useful. Say for example way in the future got a massive lens and I needed a lens support. Well, I could attach a rod on the front, extend the rods out forwards, and fit that lens support. Or say I wanted a shoulder rig, so I wanted to actually be able to hold the camera, have it on my shoulder for like a lot of handheld filming. What you would do is you get some sort of handle assembly that would mount onto the front of the rods. I then extend the rods out so they protrude way beyond the rear of the camera, and at the back of the rods I would attach some sort of shoulder support that could sit on my shoulder. So these extending rods will be really cool. I'm only going to use 30cm rods for now, but having the ability to extend them very easily is going to be absolutely great. It's much easier than having to, like, say, replace the rods with longer ones every so often. I can just extend the ones while they're already installed in the rig. So the next thing we need to do is mount the camera to the base plate. Now the simplest way to do this would be to take the base plate, take the camera, obviously you've got some screw threads in the bottom of the camera, screw that onto that, and you're done. But that's not the best idea, because it then means that your camera is permanently attached to the base plate. And if you wanted to take the camera out, either to service it or just to use it as a stills camera, for example, say you're going on holiday and you just want to take the camera out, you wouldn't be able to do that without taking out a bunch of screws. So the solution to that is using a quick release. There's going to be a lot of quick releases in this video. The traditional way of doing that is you buy a separate quick release system, and that would be a two-part kit. You'd have one plate that would screw to your base plate, another plate that would screw to the camera, and the two of those can click together or unclick from each other. It's basically the same sort of thing you'd have on top of a tripod. However, this cage has another trick up its sleeve. If you look on the bottom, you can see this thing that says F38, and other points that do say F22. F38 is another quick release system from Fallcam. So if we look at this, it says F22, so yep, if we take the F22 accessories like my side handle, we can easily take that and slot it onto the side of the camera, like that, so it will fit onto the F22 system. Or we can get an F38 plate like this, and that will also slide over the bottom of the camera. What's also really cool with this is that it actually works at a few different angles, so we can either have it go on like that, or the camera can go on sideways, like that, and that allows me to add a quick release to the camera without needing a base plate on the camera itself. So what I can do is I can take this plate here, mount it on the camera base plate like that, and just slide the camera on and off the base plate from the side like that, which is super useful. And not needing that additional base plate on the camera just means it's so much more compact. It doesn't have all these parts stacking up to adding to the height. This will just slide on and off of that. And all I need to do is fix this onto this plate here. So now we need to mount these parts together. And if you look on the bottom of this, it's got a bunch of different mounting holes, and this has a big slot on the top, so it should be quite easy to mount. I previously actually used this cheaper small rig base plate. This is significantly cheaper. This was about £18, this was over 50. But this one had this really annoying keyhole type alignment here. And while I can mount it like this, using a couple of screws in these two holes in the middle here, for reasons that will become apparent shortly, I don't actually want it mounted like this. I actually want to mount it 90 degrees like this. And there was just no combination of screw holes on this particular base plate that would line up. So instead I've swapped that out for this base plate that has a nice big slot in it, so I can mount it at this angle here with the button facing forwards. We'll see why soon, it's really cool. And I can screw through into that base plate. So what we're doing is we're using these 1/4 screw threads. With camera rigs you have either 1/4" screw threads or 3/8" screw threads, which is completely alien to me in the UK. We are metric over here, but it's all imperial on camera equipment. So either 1/4" threads or larger 3/8" threads. This has a bunch of 1/4" threads. You can also remove this silver piece, and that's a 3/8" under there, but we're just going to use two 1/4" threads with these 1/4" screws. So all we'll do is we'll take these screws here, try and carefully slot them in to the base plate like that. It's basically the exact same idea as you'd have on a tripod. Put both of these in here, and then we'll be mounting that base plate on with those two screws. And the good thing is, because there's two screws there, it won't rotate. It's not like we're mounting with a single screw and the camera could rotate. That can go in there, those two screws can go into the bottom of that plate, and there's no chance of this rotating. Okay, so that's the base plate now installed. So if you look in the back, you can see the two screws potentially. Just make them out holding it in there. I've done those up super tightly, so there's no chance of that moving. And now we can mount the camera. And what I also noticed is really smart with this quick release plate is obviously the button pushes in there, you can see unlocking it. But what you can also do with this is actually slide that button along, and now it won't press in. So you can actually really securely mount the camera, so you can't accidentally knock this and have your camera fall off. That's really smart. Literally only just discovered that. That's it there. So what we can now do is take the camera, slide it on from the side, like that. Clicks in, and that's the camera now installed. Just like that. That's completely secure there. And then to remove the camera, all I need to do is press the button in. It's a little bit fiddly to get into it. Slide it off. And that's the camera completely removed. And now this is where I'll expand on why I want to be able to mount this with the button facing forward and not off to the side. First of all, this is better anyway, because it means the camera slides on sideways, so when I've got additional hardware mounted behind the camera, that won't interfere with taking the camera out. If I mounted it 90 degrees off in the way that it would fit onto this cheaper bracket, I would have to either slide the camera off forwards or backwards. And if I was sliding it off forwards, that would probably be fine, but to slide it off backwards, it would end up hitting all the equipment behind it, and I would need to disassemble the rig to get it off. But there's actually a more important reason in this. If you look at the rig, you can see there's also an F38 mounting point here and here. So what this means, with a mounting plate orientated this way, I can take the camera, have it mounted just like that, or I can take it off, do that, and slide it on like that. Now that obviously is a bit top heavy, but it'll be fine on a tripod. The camera is now mounted to the camera rig vertically. So if I want to film any sort of vertical video, say YouTube Shorts for example, rather than trying to put like guidelines over the screen or something to try and shoot on a landscape video frame and then try and crop it afterwards, I can actually just take the camera out, rotate it 90 degrees, and shoot purely in portrait, which is really cool. I don't know how often I'll do that, but it's nice to have that option, so I can either shoot horizontally or vertically just by swapping the camera around. And literally doing that is just going to be a couple of button presses and maybe some slight cable tweaks. So yeah, that's the base plate now assembled. So now before we start building the rest of the rig, there's one more thing we need to add to this, and that is a tripod plate. With sort of mid to high end tripods, you'll generally find that the mounting plate that mounts on the camera is standardised. There's a few different standards, there's Manfrotto ones, there's Arca Swiss, there's a few others that I can't quite remember off the top of my head. So you don't necessarily need to take the plate that comes with your tripod, mount it on the camera, and then if you want to mount a different camera, take the plate off, move it over to the other camera. On cheaper tripods you might have to because they're not standardised, but on higher end ones, what you can do is just buy a different base plate, mount a base plate on each of your cameras, and just swap the cameras on and off the tripod at will. And that's what I've done here. The camcorder I'm filming on now, which is my previous camera, my Panasonic X1500, that permanently has a Manfrotto base plate installed, so I can just put it on my tripod, I can put a Manfrotto base plate on this camera rig, and just quickly swap between the cameras without replacing the base plates. So that's what we'll be doing. Now for this rig here, we're going to do something a little bit different. I've already shown this previously, and use this small rig base plate here. It's a standard Manfrotto base, so it'll just mount on my small rig tripod as normal. But what's really cool with this one is it has these legs that fold out. And this is really good because as you can see, the rig necessarily isn't completely centred around the base plate here, especially when I add all the equipment. It can get a bit heavy. So having this plate with these legs that pop out is really good because I can then lay that down and the rig will be completely stable. This has already been well used, and I have found, I think, a couple of these legs have maybe loosened off a little bit. They're perfectly secure, they just kind of get a little bit loose, so maybe a slight complaint there, but this thing is absolutely great and makes it so much safer to have this rig standing on a table. So this will be dead easy to mount. As you can see on the bottom of the base plate, there's a bunch of different screw threads. There's a 3/8 inch at the front and a 1/4 at the back. That's exactly what I've got in here. I've got a 1/4 there and a 3/8 inch there. You can swap these around, you can pull that rubber plug out and swap the screws around, but those are absolutely fine. So all we need to do is take this, mount it over the base plate here, and just put those two screws in, and that'll all be ready. And there we go, that's assembled. So now the base plate is installed on here. You're going to easily fold these legs out, just like that. And that now gives me a nice secure base to build the rest of the rig on. What we need to do is take the camera now, that'll slide on from the side, just like that. That's now securely locked in there. Then we can start building the rest of this. So, yep, that's now the base of the rig. So the next thing we'll do is we'll get the rods in. I'm kind of doing this a bit of a sort of haphazard, sort of made up order, so this maybe isn't the best way to do it, but whatever. So the two rods need to go in. What I quite like to do is put one of these, I've got a spare one of these brackets anyway, so just put one of these on the front of the rods, just to kind of keep the rods together, so when I move them, they move together rather than trying to move them individually and keep them spaced correctly. So I just take that there, they screw in like that, and tighten that on. Just like that. So that's now, both rods kind of attached together, so they'll be the same length when they slot into the camera. And what's really nice with these small rig ones, and quite a lot of other brands do this as well, is with these sort of thumb screw things here, you can actually pull them out and twist them around, and this isn't actually adjusting the screw, it's just moving the handle. So what this allows you to do is kind of get the screws tightened to the level that you need them, and then move them and move the handle so it's in a nice place where it's not obstructing anything, so that's quite nice. So that's now there, so all we now need to do is slide that into the rest of the rig, so we can just take that, slide it into the base plate at the front, have these rods slide all the way through, then you need to loosen some of these off, like that, and there we go, so that's now in. So we can kind of position this where we want it. That's probably fine, I'll maybe need to adjust it obviously later, get that all tightened up, and what we now have is a base camera rig, now has these rods where we can install additional hardware onto the back. So before I do that, I'll start installing a few other bits first. So we've got the handles, so may as well put the handles on. This will obviously all come off as we're kind of working on the rig. You can kind of completely configure this, but I'll put the handles on for now. So top handle can go in there, side handle can go in there. Now we've got kind of an easier to handle setup. So now we're going to install one of the most important parts of this rig, and I've already mentioned this before in this video, and it's this, which is my Blackmagic Video Assist 12G 7-inch. So this at first just looks like an external monitor, and it is. You can put HDMI video into it there, and then view the feed from the camera on it. And I tell you what, I am really missing using this right now, because I'm just using the camera's built-in viewfinder, or built-in LCD, because I'm using this, or I'm showing this on camera, and I keep leaning over to try and check that LCD. It's a complete pain. So if throughout this video I'm holding things out of shot and talking about them, that's why I can barely get to see that screen. So this is really good as an external screen. But what you'll also notice with this is it has SD card slots, a USB port, and audio inputs. That's because this is also an external recorder. So what you can do is you take the video feed out of the camera, feed it into this, and this is what does the recording. This has a bunch of different advantages. First of all, it can record to SSDs over the USB port rather than SD cards, so that's much faster, much easier to work with. We'll take a look at those later. I've got a really cool product to show. It also allows you to record at better quality, so you're not limited to the formats that the camera can record internally, which is generally a bit limited. With this, you can record things like ProRes, really high quality, low loss codecs. And what you can also do with this is record raw video, and that's what I'll be doing. So with this camera and this recorder, I can record Blackmagic RAW, which has so much additional colour information, so I can easily go in and colour grade, adjust the picture afterwards, without really degrading the overall picture quality. And having done the last two videos and worked with Blackmagic RAW, it works so well. So yeah, we'll be using this as an external recorder. So what we need to do is mount this to the rig somehow. And what I'll do is, for now, I'll mount it to the top handle. Now, again, we're going to be using the Fallcam quick release system. So there's a couple of different options here. What we'll be focusing on is this monitor mount here. So this is the Fallcam F22 monitor mount. And as you can see, this is just a sort of standard monitor mount. You can mount one part of this to the camera or to the handle or wherever you want to mount it, and mount the other part to the monitor. But like all the other stuff in this range, it has these quick release plates. So these are again that F22 standard. They look a little bit different to the ones on the camera rig, but they're the same idea. You have these plates here that you can mount anywhere you want, and then this will clip on and off. So that's really, really neat. So all we need to do is mount one of these to the monitor, and mount one of these to the rig here. So first of all, we'll mount it to the rig, just because that's a bit easier. So if you look over here at the camera rig, you can see we have the top handle, which is where we're going to mount the monitor. And there's a couple of places we can mount these, either on the top or off the front. For now, I'm going to put the monitor hanging off the front here, because I feel that distributes the weight better. But there is a chance I may want to mount it on the top, because if I do that, it allows me to tilt it down at a steeper angle if I'm standing below the camera and the camera is really high up. So what I'll do for now is I'll put this F22 quick release on the front, but I do also have a spare one of these that I'll mount on the top here, so I'll have one of these in two different positions so I can move the monitor at will. Now with these, when you buy them, initially they just look like this. It's just a flat plate with a screw thread in the middle, and it's a 1/4 screw. And there's some rubber bits there to kind of stop it slipping around. But in the bag with this, you'll also get these two little additional sort of, I think Torx heads, yeah, little push pin things, and you can screw these into the F22 plate. You can't use these everywhere obviously, but in certain places such as here, you can see you have the 1/4 thread and you have these additional holes around it. And likewise on the top you have the 1/4 thread and these two little divots here. In both of these situations, when you screw this in, these push pins will locate into those holes and stop this rotating. So if I screw that in there, even if the screw loosened off, it would maybe start to rattle a bit, but this isn't going to start wildly rotating. So that's really good. So what we now need to do is mount this. So dead easy, just take this, put it on the front of the camera like that, and just do up this screw. So screw that in, make sure those two push pin things go into those holes, and that's now got an F22 quick release on the front of the camera. So tighten it up. I'll probably go back and tighten all this stuff up off camera, but that's now on there. And now we can take the monitor mount, and that'll just clip on, just like that. Now it's important to bear in mind with this, if you look, you'll see there's an arrow on these F22 plates. This arrow doesn't apply everywhere. On some mounts, such as the one on top of the camera here, you can slide it on from either direction. But if you're using these square mounts like this, you have to slide it on in the direction of the arrow. But the benefit is you can actually slide it on from any angle, you can completely rotate it, but you do need to slide it on in the direction of the arrow. If you do it the other way around, it won't go on, so that's just something to bear in mind. In particular, bear that in mind if you're building the rig, because it needs to come on and off from a certain side, and you may find if you've built something, you might put something in the way that you can't get it off that way, so just bear that in mind. But yeah, with that on the front of the camera there, you're going to take the monitor mount and simply slide that on. And listen to my advice of putting it on the right way. And actually listen to my advice of putting it on the right way. There we go. That's the monitor mount now on there. So what we now need to do is get this on the monitor, and we get the monitor on the rig. So for now to mount this on the monitor, all I'm going to do is just use this basic F22 plate and screw it into one of these 1/4 threads on the bottom of the monitor. This does work fine, however, because there's no locating pins here and there's nowhere on the monitor for the locating pins to go, if you really twist the monitor and the monitor mount itself tightened up too much, so the twist on that isn't working, you do run the risk of this twisting on its screw thread and kind of loosening off over time. Now for now I'm just going to crank this really tightly, and the rubber pads will generally do a good enough job, so it will work fine. But long term I've got a plan that I might end up doing, where what you can do is, like having a camera cage, you can also buy a monitor cage. And it's a similar idea. It's a bunch of metal with a bunch of mounting holes that would screw around the cage. So it would locate around the cage and screw into a bunch of these different mounting holes around the cage, around the monitor. And because it's screwed into a bunch of holes, that'll be secure and it won't twist. What I could then use is, rather than using this basic F22 square quick release plate, I could instead use something like this, which is actually the same idea. It is an F22 plate, and if I'd say take an F22 accessory like this, it will locate on to this plate just like that, easily enough, and it actually has 3 different mounting positions, so you can actually slide it along and mount it into a few different positions. But the benefit of this is it has 2 screws. So if I had a cage around the monitor that had a bunch of quarter 20 threads along the bottom, I could then screw one of these on. They also do a longer one. Screw one of these on and screw it into two different screw holes. And because this would be screwed into 2 holes, the cage would be screwed into a bunch of holes. That then means there'll be no twisting there. So I think long term that's what I'll do. But for now, this is what I've got, so I may as well do that. I just couldn't really get a cage for this monitor particularly easily. They are available, but I think they're either really expensive to buy in the UK, or you can get them from AliExpress, but that takes a while to ship. So I'll do that a bit later. But for now, we'll just do this for now, and it will work absolutely fine. So that can screw in there like that. Just get this nice and tight, if not stupidly tight, because I do not want this monitor twisting. There we go. And now if we bring the rest of the camera rig in, and then we pan up to look at it, here we have the F22 quick release, and now that's the monitor now on. And then we can tilt the monitor up. On this side here, you can see there's a screw thread to adjust tension, so you can kind of get it in position, tighten that up so it's not flopping around. And there we go. And now we can rotate like that there. We now have the monitor attached to the camera rig. And now it's starting to look a bit more complete. So there we go, that's the monitor now mounted here. And as you can see, I've also added another F22 plate on top of the handle here. So what this means is I can easily rearrange it, and I can put the monitor on top rather than on the front of the handle. And this is what really sold me on the F22 system. It's just so versatile. As you can see right now, I have the monitor hanging off the front of the handle, but if I wanted to say tilt that down, if we tilt it, you'll find that it'll only really tilt that far and then it'll stop. So if this was really high up, I might want to tilt it further. Well, that's not a problem. All I need to do is remove it, and then just need to slide it back onto the top instead of the front. So slide it onto that mount there, and now it's on there, I can tilt it down even further, and I can say tilt it off the side as well if I wanted to. Or, say I decided actually no, I don't really want the top handle. The top handle's a bit too big, I'm trying to fit the camera into a tight space. I don't want the top handle. Well, I can take that off. I can take the plate off the monitor, or the mount off the monitor, flip the mount upside down, slide it onto the top of the camera itself, rotate this around, then we take the monitor, slide the monitor on there, and there we go. Now the monitor is attached directly to the camera without a top handle. I just couldn't find any other system at this level of versatility of being able to instantly reconfigure the system in literally seconds. You're either having to unclip NATO rails, move plates around, generally you had to screw things in to try and make it work. With this, it is just so quick to do this, it's absolutely amazing. I just can't get over how quick and easy this system is to work with. So yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. I'm so glad I went for this system, because just like that, we've now reconfigured the monitor back on top again. It literally takes seconds. So now with all this equipment installed, let's talk power. Obviously the camera takes its own battery, and as you can see on the back of the video assist, it also has these 2 spaces for Sony NPF style batteries. So the simplest option would just be to put a battery in the camera, put a battery in the video assist. There's other equipment we'll be taking a look at soon that will also need batteries. Just put a bunch of batteries in the equipment, take all those batteries out, charge them all, put them in. But that's a complete pain. There's so many different batteries here, it would just be a disaster. You'd forget to charge one of the batteries, your monitor would die while you're filming. That would just be a complete pain. So instead we're going to power all this from a centralised battery. And that's this battery here. So this is known as a V-mount battery. It's called that because the mount on the back is in the shape of a V. It's very high tech. And this is a standardised battery used on high-end cinema cameras. There's a load of different ones out there. This is the one I've gone for. I'm not sure if I would recommend this. It seems to, I don't know if it has the correct capacity. I drained it down to 0%, charged it up through a USB current meter, and I think I only got about 5 amp hours, not 6.7 amp hours. So Maybe it's faulty, maybe my power meter doesn't work, I don't know, but I'm not sure about the capacity on this. But there's a lot of V-mount batteries out there, so feel free to find one that looks good to you. But as you can see, it's just a big lithium-ion battery, 99 watt hours apparently, which is absolutely huge. You can get even bigger ones. It's just 99 watt hours is the most common large size to get, because that's the maximum size you can take on a plane. But if you're not thinking about flying with it, you can get even bigger batteries than this. And as you can see, it has a nominal voltage of 14.8 volts. This is also a neat one. It has a little screen on it, so you press that button there, screen lights up, shows the charge level. It also has a bunch of USB ports on the top, so you can power USB devices from it. You can also charge this over USB-C, which is a really good feature. And I think if I was buying a V-mount battery, that would be a feature I would absolutely focus on, because traditionally you'd use an external mains charger to charge these batteries up. But a lot of these now support USB-C, so you can get one that, say, like this, that has 45 watt USB-C power delivery charging. I think they do 65 watt ones as well with other brands. So you can just plug this into a USB-C power delivery charger and charge this thing up super quickly without needing an external charger. So of course, yep, you can power USB devices from it, but that's not the main goal of this. If you look inside, you can also see there's this port that says DTAP. This is a direct connection to the battery. That means it's not like a regulated voltage. As you can see on the front, it says 14.8 volts, but that's like the nominal voltage of the battery. When the battery is fully charged, that's going to be a bit higher, and when the battery is almost dead, that'll be about 12 volts. So the voltage out of this is going to fluctuate. This is just a direct connection to the battery, and you can also charge it over this. Then if you look on the bottom, you'll see this connection here. And this is what we're going to be using primarily. That's because while with this battery, yes, you can plug things directly into it. That's a bit of a pain, because if you want to take the battery off and swap it, you need to unplug various cables. So instead, we're going to use a V-mount battery plate. Now, not all of these actually connect onto this. Some of these are literally just a bracket to mount this battery to the camera rig. But you can also get V-mount battery plates like this that connect onto those terminals on the bottom of the battery and provide various power outputs. So this is one I've gone for here, and as you can see, the battery will mount onto this, and it'll give me a USB-C power output, which is actually power delivery capable, 2 of those DTAP outputs, which obviously will fluctuate in voltage, but we can use those, and a regulated 8 volt 3 amp output. So we can mount this onto the camera rig, connect the battery to this, and power all the equipment. This one I went for here. It's from Nitze, whatever you want to call them. It seems really good. You'll notice it's mounted off-centered on this base here. I did that, I adjusted it because I needed it to sit off to one side. You'll see why soon. But yeah, it seems really nice. It's all metal construction. Seems pretty good quality. I think there's only one thing I would say about this that I would maybe do differently if I was doing this again, is I would buy a V-mount battery plate that has an on-off switch. This one doesn't, and it means that if you leave the battery attached to the camera rig, the standby power draw of all the different parts that are all connected to it will deplete the battery. I think I worked out that if I put the battery on fully charged, after 2 weeks it would basically be dead. I think small rigs sell one that has an on-off switch, and quite a few brands do, so you can have a main on-off switch that isolates the battery, which means you could leave the battery attached to this and turn it on and off. So that would be nice, but I've not got that, but this will do absolutely fine. So all we need to do is take this plate, slide it onto the rods. This is where the rods come in super useful. Slide up the back of the camera, tighten it on, and then we can mount the battery. But before we do that, as you can see, that's going to obstruct the camera's screen. Now obviously we have the external monitor, but this doesn't show any of the camera's on-screen display, because obviously this is also recording that video. So we still need to access the camera's internal monitor to see the camera's UI and change some settings. But all we're going to do with this is just slide that back, open the screen out, slide the V-mount plate in, and then we can tighten it up. What this then allows us to do is just fold the screen in, and the screen will sit against the V-mount battery plate. So even if we have the battery installed on this plate, the screen will still fold in like that and sit perfectly neatly out of the way. So it's almost like on a camcorder, you can fold the screen out like that. It's quite cool. So yeah, that's how we're going to do that there. So that's the V-mount plate installed, but how do we power everything from this? You might be thinking I'm just going to run USB-C to everything, but that's not really how it's going to work. Most cameras, including this one, will not power up without a battery installed. So while this camera will charge itself over USB-C, you still need to have a battery in it. And this monitor here does not support power over USB-C. It either supports a 12 volt barrel jack on the side here, or batteries. That's all you've got. So for this, we're going to be using these dummy batteries. So what these are essentially is a fake battery that goes into the device. It outputs a voltage as if it's a battery, and these ones plug into the DTAP connections. You can also get dummy batteries that would connect to USB-C instead. There's a lot of different options. You can get ones that go to barrel jacks. There's loads of options out there, but I've gone for the D-tap ones. So these will connect into the D-tap connections on the side of the battery plate. This one will go into the camera. This one will go into the video assist, and these will power these devices through their battery connections. These also contain voltage regulators, so as you can see, this one here outputs 8.4 volts for the camera, and this one here for the video assist outputs 7.2 volts. I also like how cheap this is, that it for some reason also has 2400 milliamp hours printed on the back, despite the fact this is not a battery, it is just a cable. So they've obviously somehow managed to get these enclosures and labels really cheap. It's a very off-brand thing, but it does work. But yeah, this outputs 7.2 volts. So that means these do contain voltage regulators. So this can take in the sort of varying voltage out of the D-tap connection from the battery and regulate it down to 7.2 volts, or 8.4 volts, depending on what you're powering. I would say if you're buying these, just be very careful, and when you get it, plug it into the battery and check the voltage with the multimeter. I've done that with both of these and they are correctly regulating the voltage. But I have seen some very dodgy off-brand listings for ones that don't actually seem to contain voltage regulators. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to plug this into a D-tap connection, feed 14.8 volts down this and stick 14.8 volts into a 7.2 volt battery connection, because you'll probably fry the thing that's connected. So just make sure when you get these, just double check the voltages they're outputting, just to make sure that they're definitely safe. So obviously the camera absolutely needs a dummy battery. As you can see, the video assist does have a 12 volt barrel jack, so I could have used this instead. There's a couple of reasons I chose not to. First of all, I was struggling to find a trustworthy D-tap to 12 volts cable that definitely had voltage regulation in it. Almost all the ones I could easily get a hold of were just straight through cables that would not adjust the voltage. And even though I saw some things on Blackmagic's forums saying that yes, the 12 volt input on this is apparently tolerant to higher voltages, this was people on the forum, not official published documentation from Blackmagic. And given this video assist costs about £900, I wasn't going to go and try it. So instead I felt the safer option was just to use a dummy battery that I know regulates the voltage, and this will essentially emulate a battery on this, and I don't plug anything into the DC input on this. I think it'll also be nice from a cable management perspective, because if I use the barrel jack, it means I'd have a cable sticking out the side here. I'm already going to have 8 cables sticking out the side here for HDMI and audio, so kind of keeping this side completely clear seems to make sense. It would just make it a bit neater. So we'll be using the dummy battery for both of these. So that's how I'm going to be powering everything. I'm not going to install these just yet. I'm going to finish installing the rest of the hardware on the rig, and then we'll do all the cabling, just to kind of cable manage it all at once. But yeah, that's how we're going to power it from this battery plate. V-mount battery plate here, big battery fits on this, and it powers the video assist and the camera using dummy batteries, and the screen will just fold in like that pretty neatly. So next up, let's take a look at the audio hardware we'll be installing. And as you can see here, we've got quite an interesting bit of kit, and that's the Sennheiser wireless microphone system. So yep, as part of this whole upgrade, I'm also upgrading my audio. Currently I'm using a Sony ACM77B lavalier microphone. It's a really high-end lavalier mic that's used in a lot of high-end TV productions, but it is a wired mic. So I'm kind of tied into the camera, I've got a big XLR cable going into the camera. It's a bit clunky. It's worked fine for years, but having used this wireless system for the last couple of videos, finding myself tethered to the camera right now is really annoying. It's going to be absolutely great having this wireless system. So this is fairly new from Sennheiser, and it's a relatively high-end digital wireless system. So you've got a wireless receiver here that'll connect to the camera, you've got a separate wireless mic pack here that has a battery in it, and then you have your microphone connected to that. So this is a lavalier microphone. This is a Sennheiser ME2. It's a relatively sort of mid-range to entry-level lavalier mic. It's still pretty good. I think it costs about £100 to buy it, so it's not cheap, but it's a fairly good lavalier microphone, but they do higher end ones. But there's nothing stopping you replacing the lavalier mic and connecting a different mic into this. When you're buying this kit, you can either get it with the ME2 or the ME4. They just have different pickup patterns. The ME2 is the omnidirectional one, so that's what I've gone for. They also do a version with a hand mic, so if you wanted that, you can go for that instead. So yep, we have the mic pack with the lavalier microphone, and then the receiver that can go into the camera rig. And this is going to be absolutely excellent. I'm kind of tempted to do a dedicated review of this, but equally, this sort of video production stuff doesn't generally do that well when I make it, so I don't know if the video would really be worth doing, but if people are interested in seeing a dedicated video on this, let me know, and I can maybe make it happen. But yeah, this should be really good. It's a little bit higher end than the likes of, say, the Rode Wireless Go type system, but it's a lot more expensive. I think it was about £500. It was a stupid amount of money, but it seems really good and the sound quality is absolutely excellent. However, there's one thing to bear in mind with this, is that unlike things like the Rode system, which are 2.4 GHz, while this is a digital wireless system, it's not a 2.4 GHz wireless system. And that's one of the reasons I went for it, because obviously I work around a lot of networking equipment, a lot of Wi-Fi systems, a lot of systems that broadcast on the 2.4 GHz band. And the last thing I want is a microphone that's going to get interference from that and potentially drop out. So this operates on different frequency bands, so hopefully won't have that issue. However, this brings up something very important if you're buying this, and that is to check the frequency bands of the kit that you buy. Because they do a lot of different versions of this exact same product that operate on different frequency bands. And this is very important, because with radio microphones, a lot of the frequencies they use require licenses. Now, this will vary between countries, so what I'm saying here only applies to the UK, and it only applies at the time of making this video. Things can change. But with a lot of radio microphones, the frequencies they use require licenses, and you need to get a radio microphone license from Ofcom, which costs a little bit of money every year. And this is the sort of thing that a lot of professional venues and professional people will do. They'll buy a radio microphone license and use these licensed frequencies, which also prevents interference because they're using a band that they've got a license for. The use of that frequency is restricted. It's quite a good thing to do if you're working professionally. But that does mean if you're a sort of amateur user like me, you probably don't want to be paying Ofcom for radio mic licenses. So you need to make sure whatever kit you buy operates on the bands that you need. So if we look at this one here, we can see on the bottom, this is the kit that's U1/5, and it operates on 823.2 MHz to 831.8 MHz, or 863.2 to 864.8. Now on this kit, these lower frequencies, 823 to 831, are licensed. You would need a license to use those. However, 863 to 864 are not licensed, so they're license exempt. So I can use this kit without a license, as long as I make sure I always set it to the frequencies between 863.2 and 864.8, which is what I've done, so that's fine. However, a lot of versions of this don't have any unlicensed frequencies. In fact, this is the only one that does support the unlicensed frequencies. So if you buy the wrong kit, you could end up with one that only supports the licensed frequencies, and you wouldn't be able to use it without a license. And then even buying it was a bit tricky, because a bunch of retailers would only say have one version of this kit in stock, and they wouldn't even say the frequencies it operated on. So you had to Google the part number, and then you'd find the part number on the Sennheiser site, and more often than not I found that was actually one that required licensed frequencies. This one I bought from Scan in the UK, and on their website they listed it as U1/5, but actually listed the wrong frequencies against it, and the frequencies they listed would require a license. So that was even a bit vague. I actually ended up going picking this up in store from them, so if it turned out it did have the wrong frequencies, I would be able to return it there and then, but it turned out no, the U1/5 one on the Scan website was the one that operates on the unlicensed frequencies. They just listed the wrong frequencies against it on their website. But yeah, that's the thing as you're buying this. Make sure you take care with the frequency ranges you're buying to make sure you can use it in your country legally without a license, or where you can get a license for those frequencies. So just something to bear in mind. So yeah, long ramble there. Really should make a dedicated video on this, but that's just what I wanted to say there. But yeah, this is the mic receiver. So what I now need to do is mount this to the camera rig. This comes with a bunch of different options for mounting. You can either mount just a 1/4" thread into the bottom of this. It comes with things like a cold shoe adapter, so you can mount it onto a shoe connection if you wanted to do that. Or it comes with this cheese plate which has magnets on it, and this is what we're using. So this plate can then mount onto the bottom of the receiver like that, and it holds on magnetically. And if you've got multiple receivers, say for multiple channels, they actually stack magnetically, which is really cool. I really like that idea. So what we need to do is mount this plate onto the camera rig. So what I'll be doing for that is I'll be using this rod plate here, because this can just slide over the rods. And then to make it quick release, so I can take this off of this, I could just screw that straight to there and it would work fine. But instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this F22 rail onto this plate here, mount this F22 plate connector onto this plate here, and this will allow me to take this whole assembly, click it on there, click it off, and it'll allow me to move it around. For example, I could take it off of here and instead mount the mic receiver onto the side of the camera rig there. It's going to be pretty versatile, so that's what we'll do. So I'll go away off camera, get that all mounted, and then we'll take a look at it working. And there we go, that's all mounted. So we can see we have the plate installed on there, receiver just sits on top. We can also easily remove the plate from that quick release like that. I just put a little rubber washer in there to stop that rotating, because it's only got one screw fixing. then this is really versatile. So instead, say I don't actually want this plate on the back, I want to make the rig a lot shorter. Well, instead with this quick release, I can take it, slot it onto the side of the camera like that, and mount the receiver on there. It's super versatile. Say maybe I don't want it on there, instead I want it on top of the handle. I can take the top handle, slide it on like that, and now have it mounted like that on top of the top handle. So of course I need to rearrange the cables for doing that, but that is what's so good about this F22 system. I can easily move parts like this around without any tools. It just literally clips on. It's absolutely great. So that's how we're going to mount the radio mic receiver there. So the next stage is probably one of the least fun ones, which is cabling all this up and trying to cable manage this whole thing. So we've got a bunch of cables here, so what we'll do is we'll go through them, talk about what we're doing with them, then I'll go away, get them all installed, and we'll take a look at the finished rig. So first up over here we have the dummy batteries we already talked about. So we have this Sony NPF style dummy battery for the video assist, and this Panasonic dummy battery for the camera itself. And those both go to the DTAP connections that will go directly onto this battery plate here. Then to power the radio mic receiver, I'm just going to use this right angled USB-C cable. It was a bit tricky trying to find a cable that would fit in this gap here and not foul the monitor, so I've gone for this right angled one here that should fit. It'll be a bit on show, but it should be fine. I'll just sort of kind of have that managed in like that. That'll connect the power from the radio mic receiver into the battery plate, and the screen will still kind of fold over that. It does stick out a little bit, it's not perfect. I might get a different cable in the future, but this will do for now. Next up, we have the cables going up to the video assist. So first of all, obviously we need HDMI. This camera, very annoyingly, has micro HDMI, which is an absolutely dreadful connector. It's a tiny little super fragile flimsy connector. And I think on newer cameras they've actually replaced that with full-size HDMI, but again, this was a good deal. So I bought this micro HDMI to full-size HDMI cable. I'll be using this to connect up to the monitor. Now, I would say if you're buying one of these cables, be careful with the one you buy, because the first one I bought was a micro HDMI to HDMI that was rated for 4K. However, it could not handle a 5.9K RAW and kept dropping out. So I bought this one that was, again, a fairly generic, cheapy Amazon thing, but it actually does specifically say 8K, so I think that would be for HDMI 2.1, but this cable works absolutely fine. So that'll connect from the micro HDMI on the camera up into the side of the video assist. Also, obviously we'll have the power going up the video assist, and also we want audio. Now I could technically plug the radio mic receiver directly into the mic input on the side of the camera, and it comes with a cable for that, just straight from there into there, and that would work. However, I did a bit of testing, and while the noise floor of the inputs on this camera is okay, it's not nearly as bad as the Panasonic camera I'm filming with now, where if you listen carefully you'll hear a ridiculous amount of noise. That's just this camera's dreadful microphone inputs. This camera isn't as bad. However, the mic inputs on this video assist are just so much better. The noise floor on these is absolutely incredible. It's up there with like a high-end audio interface. It's really, really good. So it seems a shame to not use those. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the radio mic receiver into the video assist directly and record the audio into that. So for that I've made up this cheap little cable, which is just a mini XLR to 3.5mm cable, because this has a 3.5mm output, and the video assist has a mini XLR input up there. I actually ended up making up this cable myself. You can buy these pre-made, but I'd be very careful of the wiring of the one you buy, and you may need to rewire it. That's because XLR connectors are used in all sorts of weird and wonderful ways. And what seems to be the case is that most 3.5mm to XLR cables are trying to take stereo audio from the 3.5mm end and pass the stereo audio out the XLR. So you'll have one of the pins will be ground, one will be the left channel, and one will be the right channel. However, the video assist is expecting balanced audio over the XLR, where one of these would be ground, one of those would be the signal, and one of those would be the inverse of the signal. And this is how balanced audio works. If my memory serves me correctly, if you were to use one of those cables that's sending the stereo audio out of this, what would happen is the left channel would go to one of the balanced XLR inputs, the right channel would go to the other balanced XLR input, and when it goes through the circuitry that handles the balancing, essentially it would subtract the two channels from each other, and you'd end up with no audio. So you need to rewire it potentially if you did buy a pre-made cable. Now, the Sennheiser microphone also came with this 3.5mm to XLR cable designed for connecting this into an XLR input, so all I did was open this up, take a look at the wiring, and replicate it here. Essentially all you do is connect the ground to the ground, one of the audio channels to the hot on the XLR, and then the cold on the XLR also connects to ground, so that's how we do that. So I made this cable up here to connect these two things together. So what I'll do is I'll go away off camera and get all this cabled in. What I'm also going to do is need to try and manage these cables, so when the cable comes down from the video assist, I want some way to kind of clip it to the rig so it's not going to tug on the connectors. So for that I've come up with a bit of a solution. So I'm going to be using these small rig cable clamps, and these are absolutely great. They're quite expensive, it's about £20 for a pack of 4 I think, but what you end up with is a little plastic cable clamp with this really nice silicone on the inside. So if you put a cable through this and then clamp it down, it holds that cable really securely, and you can easily put multiple cables into these without a problem. And then because it has a 1/4-20 screw thread inside it, you can really just screw it anywhere on the camera rig. And for that I'm going to use this, which I've already shown earlier, which just goes onto the rod. So I'll put this onto the rod here and mount it on the rod, mount this cable clamp onto this, and that'll allow all the cables to be neatly clamped onto the rig so they won't pull and as I'm moving the camera and I'm not going to tug on the connectors. So that's how I'll be doing the cable mount management. So yeah, these are really good little things. So yeah, what I'll now do is I'll go away, get the monitor cabled up, and then we'll come back. Okay, so we're now mostly cabled up. So as you can see here, we've got a USB-C cable going from the mic receiver into the V-mount battery plates. That's dead simple. And then we've got this massive set of cables going up to the video assist. So what I ultimately did here is, because the HDMI cable was coiled, I've actually coiled it around the cable for the power and audio, and that actually works really neatly. Now of course it's important to bear in mind here that obviously while this coil cable is springy, these cables aren't, so not to like pull the monitor and tug on those cables, because even though this looks like it will extend, the inner ones won't. But this works really nicely because it keeps all the cables out of the way, and I don't need to use some sort of additional cable braid or anything like that. And while I was initially going to use this little sort of cable clamp on a rod mount thing, with this new rod plate that compared to the old one I was using, it actually worked out easier just to do this. So I was just using one of those small rig cable clamps attached to the base plate. This cable comes in, clamps into that, it keeps it out of the way of the lens doesn't touch it or anything, so that's good. And the cables go through there, so that's dead neat. So obviously the HDMI comes down through this clip, comes out the side and plugs into the side of the camera. And I'll be able to keep it quite nice and tight out the way so it comes round and then goes into the clip. So even though this cable isn't actually clipped in, this cage doesn't have the ability to have a cable clamp on it, it keeps that flimsy micro HDMI cable neatly out the way so it's not going to get bumped or dislodged while I'm using it, which is quite important. Then for power, the cable comes down here, round the front, it then loops under here like that. The slack is then hidden behind the V-mount battery plate, so there's a bit of space in there, so the cable slack goes behind here, comes out, and then plugs into the side of the V-mount plate here. Then finally, to power the camera, we have the dummy battery installed, so the dummy battery is installed there, as you can see, the cable comes out. Now, this dummy battery had a really long coiled cable, it was really annoying. So what I actually did is, in this base plate, there's actually quite a lot of dead space. So I took one of the rods out, stuffed all the coiled up cable slack inside there, because it was sort of coiled cable, stuffed it all in there to get it out of the way, and then on the other side, that cable then comes out again here, comes round and up, and inside the V-mount plate. So that was actually a really good space just to stash all that cable. Obviously it's a bit of a pain to access, but I should never really need that additional cable, so that's quite good under there. And there's even more space under there, so if I had any additional cable slack to store, I could actually hide it under there quite easily. So yeah, for stashing cable slack, I've got the space under the plate down here, and I've also got the space behind this V-mount plate in where the camera's LCD would fold in, so there's a couple of spaces to hide slack cable in, which is quite good. However, with the setup, you might notice one cable that's missing, and that is we have no audio connection to the radio mic receiver. And if you look around the front of the rig, you can see the cable's hanging off here, and is definitely not long enough to be able to reach this. But there's a good reason for this, and that is that this system has a ground loop. Now, if you're not familiar with what a ground loop is, it's a phenomenon that can quite often occur with things that are powered from the same power source. So this can happen with both mains powered devices, say powered from the same power strip or circuit, or from battery powered devices where they're powered from the same battery. And what it means is where current ends up flowing to ground via a source where it's not really meant to flow down that cable. For example here, all the devices are powered off this V-mount battery plate. So the camera, the monitor and the mic receiver are all powered from here. So on each device what should happen is the power should flow into the positive connection through the device and then back down the negative. So it should flow down the negative of the dummy battery in the monitor, the dummy battery in the camera and the USB connection on the recorder. However, you can see that we also have different connections here as well that will also be grounded, such as the audio connections. So where this ground loop occurs is what ends up happening is some of the power is the monitor gets its power up the positive, it'll still return a lot of that down the negative of the dummy battery, but some of that power instead goes down, finds its path to ground via the audio cable. So some of that is coming down the ground of the audio cable, into the radio mic receiver, down the USB cable, and then to ground that way. The exact same problem occurs if I plug the radio mic receiver into the camera. The current is coming into the camera through the dummy battery, and then some of it is coming out the camera, down the audio ground, into the radio mic receiver, down the USB cable, and to the base plate. And the problem with this is because we're dealing with audio signals, this creates interference on the audio. And it ends up sounding like this. And this is what the audio sounds like when we have the ground loop. So obviously that audio is completely unusable, but thankfully it's not too hard to fix. All we need is a ground loop isolator. These are not expensive. This one was literally I think £4.99 on Amazon. You don't need some stupidly expensive thing. And all this does is it contains a couple of transformers. We can actually open it up because it's not that well made, like that. And if you look inside, there's just a couple of transformers and a couple of 3.5mm jacks. And ultimately one of those transformers will be for the left channel, one will be for the right channel. And because the audio is now going through a transformer, it's galvanically isolated between the two sides. So the ground continuity is not carried through. If you were to test the ground of this side and this side of the multimeter, there'd be no continuity there because it's going through a transformer. But obviously because the audio is an AC signal, that can pass through a transformer, but DC can't. So this is actually all you need. And with a ground loop isolator in line, so all you need to do is put this in between the 3.5mm connection up to the video assist and the mic receiver. That breaks the ground loop, there's no ground continuity there, and it completely gets rid of the issue. So it's a relatively easy fix, it's just something to bear in mind. So obviously I need to install this into the rig somehow. What I think I'm going to do, based on the sort of cable length involved and the size of this, I'm going to fail to put it back together quickly on camera because I'm rushing. I'm going to put it back together like that. And what I think I'll do is I've already got one of these spare rod plates here. So what I think I'll do is I'll try and mount this to this somehow, like that. And then I'll slide this onto the front of the camera, so this will sit sort of underneath the lens there, out of the way. This can then easily plug in the cable up to the video assist, and then we can run the cable from the mic receiver down the side of the camera and into there. So that should be relatively easy to do. So I'll go away and do that off camera, and then we'll come back. And there we go, that's now mounted. So all I've done is I drilled 2 holes in the bottom of this ground loop isolator's casing, and just put a zip tie, so the zip tie comes up through the hole in this base plate, through the enclosure, out the bottom and back in. So that's really securely on there. So that'll be easy enough to install into the rig. So we can now just slide this over the rods on the front. Trying to loosen these off a little bit. Let's get these all loosened off. Slide that over. Push that back. Like that. And then we can plug it in. So yep, that's now installed. And there we go, that's now installed. So you can see the ground loop isolator is now mounted under there. The output to the monitor comes in here. And then the input from the recorder, from the mic receiver, comes down this cable here, tucked along under there, and plugs into there. And it also means if I did want to swap this out for some sort of other recorder, I can easily pull that out there and plug another audio source into there. So that works pretty neatly. So that keeps it all out of the way, and that works absolutely fine, and solves the ground loop issue. So now with that done, there's only one more bit of audio hardware I want to add. And that's this little microphone here. This is a Deity D4 Mini, and it's a tiny little camera top microphone. It's similar to things like the Rode Video Micro and things like that. It's a relatively cheap little microphone. Now, generally speaking, I don't use the audio from the camera's built-in microphone. There's really isn't a point in using that. However, while I normally use a lav mic, it is sometimes nice to also be able to capture the audio in front of the camera. Say for example I'm filming something, a bit of technology, and it makes a noise, and that noise is important. The lav mic might not necessarily pick that up, whereas this additional microphone might. And with the pickup pattern of this microphone, it's kind of like a mini shotgun microphone, in the sense it's relatively directional. So this will hopefully pick up sounds in front of the camera, but not lots of background noise. Whereas the microphone built into a camera, they aren't very good, and it'll pick up a lot of background noise. So that's why I'm going to use this. Now, I'm not going to go to all the hassle of trying to plug this up into the video assist, which would also require some sort of adapter between phantom power and plug-in power. I'm just going to plug this into the camera itself, just to keep things simple. Now, you may be wondering why I went for the D4 Mini in particular. And that's because it has one really useful feature. It has this additional audio input. And this is really cool. Now, this was back from when I originally planned on plugging the microphone receiver, the wireless mic receiver, directly into the camera. Because the problem with doing that is when you plug something like this into a camera's 3.5mm input, it disables the camera's built-in microphone. So that would mean if I were to plug my mic receiver into the camera, the only microphone I would have recording would be my wireless mic. And the problem with that is that if the wireless mic died, or I forgot to turn it on, or whatever, lots of things can go wrong, I would have no audio. So what's really cool with this microphone is you can plug this into the camera, then plug the wireless mic receiver into this input here. What will happen is it'll put this microphone on one of the stereo channels, this microphone on the other stereo channel, and send both of them down the same cable into the camera's 3.5mm mic input. So what this would have allowed me to do is have both these microphones plugged into the camera and record them both at the same time, and then in post be able to separate out my radio mic from the camera top mic. So that would be really, really good. Now, of course, with this setup now, because I'm recording the wireless mic into the video assist for better quality, I don't really need this mic. I could leave it off, or I could have used any other mic that doesn't have this input. However, this will still be really nice to have, because while I will normally be recording with this complete setup, it is relatively likely that at some point I'll need to fit this camera into an environment where this recorder will be too big. At which point I can take this off, then keep this camera top microphone on, and plug my wireless mic into this input, or even just the lav mic itself into this, and have both the lav mic and a backup audio source coming from this camera top microphone. So this is something I would definitely recommend. If you're ever, recording audio from a wireless system especially, I would always recommend having some sort of additional backup audio source. I see it all the time on YouTube when people use those like Rode Video Wireless Go things, when they use them with like a GoPro. They'll plug it in, it then removes any sort of microphone, so the only audio they're recording is their wireless microphone, and then they'll forget to turn it on and completely lose the audio for an entire shoot. So it's a really good idea to have this as like a backup audio source. You can use this as a microphone that captures the audio from the environment around it and feed your wireless mic into that. In fact, I might actually do a short just kind of explaining this in more detail for people, because it's something really cool. It's not a very well publicised product, but actually that little microphone input is a super smart idea. So all I'll do for this is I'll just route the cable down behind the camera, because I can just kind of keep it out of the way like that there, and then this will just plug into the camera's mic input on the side, because I don't really need the quality, I just kind of need the convenience of having that in there. So that'll plug in there like that. It's also actually quite important with the setup to have audio from the camera itself, be it this microphone or the camera's built-in microphone. And that's because when I'm recording the audio externally into the recorder, there's actually a delay that makes the audio out of sync. And that's because the HDMI output on the camera is slightly delayed. And this is quite common. So what you end up doing is the video you're feeding into the monitor is delayed just by a few frames. But because the audio going into the recorder is not delayed, because it's analog audio, it ends up meaning that the audio is out of sync with the video. And it's not a huge difference, but if you're very sensitive to that sort of thing, you can potentially tell. So by recording audio into the camera, either the built-in mic or this external mic, it means that in post when I start editing, what I do is I synchronize the audio from the external mic plugged in here, I synchronize that with the audio recorded by the camera's built-in mic, and it brings all the audio back into sync. So yep, that's that mounted there, just mounted on the cold shoe adapter on the cage. Neat enough up there out of the way. I can still get into the buttons underneath, it's not too in the way. So yeah, that's installed there. So with that, that's all the audio hardware installed into the camera rig. So the final thing we need to do is work out a way to mount my Samsung T7 SSDs. The video assist normally can record to SD cards, so there's a pair of SD card slots on the side, you can put SD cards in and record to that, but that's not ideal. SD cards aren't available in super large capacities, and pretty high capacity ones are extremely expensive. So it's much more cost effective to record to SSDs over the USB-C connection that's built into the video assist on the bottom. You can just plug an SSD into that and record directly to it. These are available in much larger capacities and much cheaper than SD cards. This is the more entry level T7, which is a terabyte, and this only costs about £87, something like that, or even closer to £80. And these are super fast. This can read and write at about a gigabyte a second, so I can easily edit off of this. In fact, since I started doing this, I never ingest footage onto my laptop anymore. I just plug the SSD in and edit straight off of it. And if it ever means that if I ever need to edit off of a different machine, I can just save my DaVinci Resolve project file to the SSD, plug it in, and I have my project file and all the footage on the drive. These things work great. But obviously you need to try and mount it on the camera rig somewhere. Now with my previous setup, when I used the video assist with my camcorder, I used this small rig bracket here. Which only when someone actually commented asking about what model it was, did I realise this isn't actually for the T7, it's actually for the older T5. which is a bit thicker. Now the T7 does fit if you put it in and crank it down all the way. It does work. You can kind of put the SSD in there, it mounts it in place. You can put a cable in the back and kind of clamp down onto the cable as well, and it works. But obviously this isn't actually designed for this SSD, so it doesn't fit it perfectly, and it's not that nice to mount. It's not my favourite thing in the world. But this is where I got a really cool alternative, and this is a really cool product. So here it is, and this is called a CineDock. It's available from the CameraFoundry website, which is run by Caleb Pike of the DSLR Video Shooter YouTube channel. And on that YouTube channel he's done a lot of really good videos about camera rigs. This is where I learned most of this stuff from. But he's got a store where he sells these, and a bunch of other really interesting 3D printed camera accessories. So yeah, this is a 3D printed dock that fits Samsung T7 SSDs, and they also do a version for the T5. Like that. So you can either buy them pre-printed like this, like the one I did, or you can buy the 3D printing model for a bit cheaper and you can print it yourself, but I just bought the pre-made one because I don't have a 3D printer. And with that you get all the parts to assemble this, apart from the cable. So you will need to supply the cable yourself. The cable they recommend is a fairly sort of generic off-brand Amazon item that I couldn't find in the UK, but I was able to find the exact same thing sold under a different brand. So this is the brand of this is like Talk or something, like AA Talk, whatever that is. That's the brand I got. They recommend a different brand, but essentially what you're looking for is this style of moulding on the USB-C connector, because that's the style and the sort of design that's designed to fit into this CineDock here. So all you do is you get a few different parts, you put the USB-C connector in, screw these pieces down, screw it all together, and it gives you this. And with this you can mount it onto your camera rig using a bunch of 1/4" mounts, and then just drop your SSD in the top, click it in, plug it into Video Assist, and off you go. This is such a cool idea. It just works so well. I absolutely love it. And it's really cool seeing sort of small creators, or fairly big creators, but creators actually producing their own like camera rig parts. It really shows the sort of advantages of 3D printing. It's really smart. So we'll be using this. Now if you're observant you might notice something a bit weird on the back of mine, because mine has a weird Sony NPF dummy battery screwed to the back. This isn't official, this doesn't come with the CineDock, but what I was thinking with my setup here is obviously I have the Video Assist, and it's now powered from the dummy battery, so I essentially have a spare battery connection that's not being used because the dummy battery is there. I'm never going to use this battery connection. So what I thought for mounting this, rather than trying to mount this down the bottom in the camera rig, which is what they did in their YouTube channel where they kind of mounted it down here, instead of doing that, what I thought is instead of that, what about actually mounting it at the back of the Video Assist? Because it also means that I don't need to worry about routing a USB-C cable all the way through down somewhere down here, taking up space on the camera rig, making it longer. I can just mount it on the back. So for that, what I did is I bought a cheap Sony NPF dummy battery. Obviously, use a dummy battery, not a real battery. That would be really silly. Opened it up and gutted it. I drilled a hole in the back because I thought I couldn't figure out a way to get into it. Drilled a hole in the back, then found there was screws hidden under a sticker, so took the screws out and opened it. So the hole's completely unnecessary. But then with this gutted, I then screwed it to the CineDock and made this. I'll actually be releasing a YouTube short showing me actually building this because I thought it was quite an interesting trick. But with the CineDock mounted to this Sony NPF dummy battery, what I can do is just click that into the back of the Video Assist, take my USB-C cable, route it around neatly with sort of decent sort of like curve in it just to kind of dress it in nicely, plug it into the bottom of the Video Assist if I can find the USB-C connector. Like that. And there we go. So now I have my Video Assist with an SSD dock on the back. So if we get that to the sort of position it's going to be when I'm actually using it live, like that. There we go, look at that. Now that is super slick. So I can just take my camera rig, take my SSD, just literally drop it in the back there, record it, film, use the camera handheld if I need to, use it on a tripod, whatever I need. And when I'm finished shooting, come over, pull the SSD out, plug it to my laptop, edit the footage, and when I'm done, just plop it back into the camera. This CineDock is so cool, and I'm really proud of this little mounting mechanism idea because it just keeps it completely out of the way and just uses a mounting point that would have otherwise been completely unused. So yeah, that works really well. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I absolutely love this thing. And stand by for that short I'll be putting out showing how I built this. I mean, you've already seen how I built this really because I've explained it all and it's not exactly rocket science, but yeah, really proud of this little thing. So yep, that's how we mount the SSD. And it just sits like that with the cable out the way, and because it's kind of all hanging off the back of the rig, there's no chance this cable getting tugged on or disconnected because it kind of just sits there not attached to anything, so that's really pretty good. So with that all done, there's one final thing I want to do to this rig, and realistically for the setup it is completely not essential, but it makes this look so much better, and that is installing a matte box. So you'll see this using a lot of camera rigs and a lot of cameras use these. In my setup here, it is very much not essential from any sort of picture point of view, but it just makes the whole thing look so much better. So this is the matte box here. This is the Small Rig Mini Matte Box Lite. It's a really nice lightweight carbon fibre one, so that's quite good. It's not bulky at all. These technically they prevent light coming in from the side and kind of causing issues with the lens potentially, and you can also do things like clip square filters into this. So if you want to use like an ND filter and you want a square one rather than a one that screws onto the lens, you want like a square filter that fits in here, you can install these and there's a clip for attaching those. Yes, you can do that, and there's this flap to block additional light. I'll be the first to admit that I'm not doing this for any kind of light management or filter installation. I'm just doing this because this looks so much cooler than that. And without this on there, the camera rig looks kind of naked. I mean, it looks like an SLR or a mirrorless camera on a bunch of metal, which it is, but this makes it look like a proper camera. So for the sake of the small cost of one of these, I may as well add it. So this is a Small Rig Mini Matte Box, and as you can see, it's designed to install onto 95mm lens, which obviously this isn't. But in the box you get a bunch of adapters, so this is the 95 to 67mm adapter for the 67mm lens, but whatever lens you have, you can get these. They come with a bunch in the box. And all we need to do is screw this onto the front of the lens, like that. This is nice, it actually has another screw thread inside, so if you've got round filters you want to install, you can also install these onto this. Screw that on there like that. Then we take the matte box, we slide it over this. I probably won't get it on straight first time, but I can go and adjust it after the fact. Take that on there, screw it on nicely, and now with that on there, you've got to admit, it does look a lot more serious when you put that on there. Without that, it looks a little bit silly. So yep, that's now installed, and yeah, it's not too squint, that's pretty good. So yeah, that's the whole rig now basically assembled. So now what we need to do to complete it off is install the battery, then we can fire it up. So take the battery, that'll clip down onto the V-mount plate, like that, and that is now the completed camera rig. So before we go away and start using it, won't really show it in too much detail in this video, let's turn it on and check it all works. So turn on the video assist, turn on the camera, turn on the mic receiver, like that, that's all turning on. And yep, it's working. So we're now getting video on the screen from the camera. As you can see, that's working. If we look at the audio channels here, you can see we're currently getting 2 audio channels coming in from the microphone here. So if I tap this, you'll see we're getting that. And then if I turn on the radio mic, we should be able to see that as well. So yep, here's the radio mic, turn that on. Let it connect up to the receiver, there we go. So that's now working. So now we have the microphone built into the camera here. You can see on the first 2 channels, I'll try and get a bigger display of it up. Yep, so there you go. The first 2 channels are this mic. Interestingly, that's not picking that up. Oh, I've plugged into the wrong port, that's why. Plug that into the audio output on the audio input, there we go. So now this mic connected in here. That's now on the first 2 channels, and this mic here is on the 3rd channel. So, yep, they're all working. We've got both microphones now picked up by the video assist. So, yeah, it's all working absolutely perfectly. So yeah, that's kind of the completed camera rig, and I absolutely love this thing. It's super powerful. The SSD is registered down there as well, you can see, so we can record to that. It's recording Blackmagic RAW at 5.9K, which is absolutely excellent. And yeah, working with the raw video of this works really nicely. So yeah, that's the rig now completed. Now, there's one last thing I want to demonstrate, and that is how I can rotate the camera on this rig and shoot vertical video for things like shorts. So it's not like an instant thing to convert it, but it's not too bad. So if I take the monitor off like that, put that down to the side, I'll just take the battery off as well, just so nothing's powered while we're doing this. Then all we need to do is disconnect the micro HDMI cable from the side of the camera. I'll take the top microphone off just because that's just going to get in the way, although I could realistically leave that. Then, if I press the front button under the camera, that will release it from the quick release plate and allow me to slide it off, like that. Camera slides off. Take the camera vertically. Then we just slide it into the quick release plate, like that. And that's the camera now mounted vertically. What we can then easily enough do is just swap some of the handles around, so we can say take the top handle off, move this handle put the top handle onto the top rather than the side handle. Next up, all we need is some sort of way to mount the monitor. I could probably figure out a much better way of doing this with, you know, a different bracket or something rather than this one. But for now, we'll just use this basic bracket here. So I found the best way to do it is to flip that round, then mount that on there like that. That'll clip onto the F22 on the bottom. Then rotate this round like that. Slide the monitor into there, just like that. These are a little bit tricky to slide in sometimes if the thing's sort of stuck off axis, but there we go, that's now in. So that's the monitor now in. And then all we need to do is find a replacement for the HDMI cable, because obviously this HDMI cable is kind of a little bit short and it's kind of neatly dressed in. So all I figured out the best option for this is just use a second HDMI cable that I have spare, which I have here. So I can easily plug this into the top of the camera like that. That just plugs it in there. I should probably get a shorter cable to replace this one, but this one will do for now. It's just a demonstration. Take that cable there, plug the other end of this cable into the bottom of the video assist, into the HDMI input, just like that. And now with that there, I now have a rig that can shoot vertical video. Now obviously this may look a bit silly and a little bit lopsided and a bit kind of messy, but this is going to be ideal for shooting things like shorts, because even though this does look completely lopsided and it's not perfectly centered in terms of balance, this will mount absolutely perfectly onto a tripod. That won't be an issue at all. Then all I need to do is obviously, but screen kind of needs to go out of the way, put a battery on it like that, turn on the camera, radio mic, receiver, and the video assist, and straight away like that, and I can shoot vertical video. So you can see there on the video assist, we're now seeing a vertical video feed from front of the camera. It's all the right way up, and it means I can easily frame shots for doing vertical video rather than trying to do some sort of overlay on this, because this annoyingly doesn't have support for creating an overlay with guidelines for vertical resolutions. But yeah, I don't think I'll be doing this that often, but it does go to show with this rig and how I've built it, I can very easily reconfigure it and do things like this. And as you can see there, it really doesn't take that long to do that kind of reconfiguration of this rig. So yeah, what we'll do now is I'll quickly try and reassemble this back so I can shoot normal landscape videos, and then I'll come back and wrap this up. And with that, we now have a completed camera rig. And I'm so happy with how this turned out. It just looks absolutely excellent, and having played with this to make a couple of videos, the video quality is absolutely brilliant. And recording in a raw video format is great. It makes it so easy to colour grade the footage and adjust it after the fact. There's just so much information there to work with. And to be honest, the file sizes aren't huge. The good thing with this video assist is it can record on a constant quality codec, which means that if there's not much stuff changing in the scene and it's a fairly static picture, like most of my videos are, it will turn the bitrate down much lower. But then if there's a lot of complex stuff happening in the scene, say there's like confetti or water or something like that, then it'll turn the bitrate right up to handle that additional information. So because I don't have that much sort of fast moving stuff in my videos, that constant quality codec actually keeps the raw file sizes quite small. So yeah, really happy with it. Obviously I've shown how I built this all, and there's only one other thing that I've done off camera that is completely minor, but I thought I would mention because it's quite neat. I don't know, it's really not exciting. But on the camera down here, there is a microphone input and a 3.5mm headphone jack. And you might have remembered earlier when I was testing this out, I realised that I'd accidentally plugged this into the headphone jack. It's very easy to accidentally take the microphone and plug it into the headphone jack. And because that then doesn't disable the onboard microphones, the actual VU meter still looks like it's picking up audio. So it would be very easy to accidentally do that and not realise that you've actually plugged the microphone into the headphone jack and you're not getting audio from it. So all I did is I went online, and turns out you can pick up these little dust covers. If you search for silicone dust cover and then the name of a port, so you get these for 3.5mm audio jacks, HDMI, DisplayPort, USB, anything you can really imagine, they don't cost very much. And I can just stick that into the headphone jack, and that now means I can't accidentally plug the microphone in there. I can still also use it if I need to, but I'm not going to accidentally stick something in there. So yeah, they're really neat, so I would definitely recommend that. A lot of my sort of kind of stuff around the setup is trying to make something foolproof, so I can't come along and easily just make a quick mistake and then completely ruin the audio for a video. So yeah, it's a little tweak I did there off camera, but yeah, really happy with it. And I'm actually so excited to make videos with this going forwards, because it gives me so much more control. It's just also quite fun to play with. It's really cool. So yeah, really can't wait to make more videos using this new setup. So there you go. Hopefully you found this video interesting or potentially educational if you're sort of, you know, learning about this kind of stuff. Obviously I'm not an expert, but Hopefully you can come along with the journey of me learning this stuff as well, because this was all new to me before I built this. But yeah, I'm very happy with it. And stand by for a lot more future videos filmed with this absolute beast of a camera rig. But all that's left to say now is thank you very much for watching.